My name is Phil Clement. I'm the CEO of World Business Chicago, which is the public-private partnership responsible for economic development in Chicago. And we've got a great topic. How am I doing? Can you hear me? Yep, okay, good. So I'm gonna start with the story from February 12th, 2011, when I was Chief Marketing Officer of Aon Corporation. And on that day, a gentleman named Wayne Rooney, which some of you may know of, was wearing a Manchester United jersey that happened to have my company name on it. So I was super excited for this moment. And they were playing the Blues. The Reds were playing the Blues. And Manchester United was playing Manchester City. And in a remarkable turn of events at the very end of the game, Wayne Rooney did what is oftentimes called one of the best soccer goals of all time. It was a bicycle kick, which means you have to be inverted, upside down, put it into the corner, and won the game. And the biggest derby in the world, meaning biggest rivalry in the world. Suddenly that picture where as he celebrates, he goes like this. My company's name is Aon, and that's on the cover of the Financial Times, Time magazine. I mean, it was everywhere. It was described by the Wall Street Journal as a sublime moment. I had no idea the power of sport until that moment. I literally had people that were sending me photos from like alleys in Turkey, safaris in Africa, markets in Japan, where they were seeing the image, they were excited about the image, and sport continues to be one of the most important ambassadors that we have in the world. It sends messages out in ways that are unbelievable, but it also breaks barriers consistently, right? It can bring nations together. It has broken racial barriers, gender barriers, all sorts of inclusion barriers. So it's an important part. And certainly here in Chicago, we have learned that. For a while, I think we were synonymous with Michael Jordan. We went from Al Capone to Michael Jordan. And that importance of that diplomacy is incredible. And we got a great group here to talk about that. One of the things we'll try to get at is, why sport, right? Why is it so important? And certainly it's a place where a lot of drama is and where our heart is. And I think that's where we need to bring the climate conversation. It's part of why Aspen Ideas Week has emphasized storytelling as a big, important part of this movement. So with that, I'm going to start to chat with our amazing panelists, and I'd love to have them kind of introduce themselves rather than read introductions. But I'm going to start with one of my oldest friends. Well, you're not one of my oldest friends. You're one of my longest-term friends, Kara Bachman, Sports Commissioner from Chicago. So could you give us just a little bit about your organization and what you do there?
Yes, thanks. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here. So Phil started talking about sport, and that is my day in and day out. Born and raised here in Chicago, and my job for the past about 14 years has been with the Chicago Sports Commission, which is part of Choose Chicago, our tourism convention bureau. But my team, we focus solely on bringing sporting events to the city to drive visitors to our city, to create positive media exposure, create jobs, generate economic impact. And we've done that working with almost every single U.S. professional league, NFL, NBA, NHL, MLS, MLB, you name it. And as well as international groups as well, and international soccer, where we have Premier League coming to town. We've had Sail GP and America's Cup World Series. So with all of these events, we are trying to hit the audiences in various countries that are fans of those sports, get their eyes on Chicago, whether that's to visit Chicago, learn more about Chicago, or experience Chicago through a live broadcast. And we've had a great run. We keep going. We work pretty actively with Phil and his team at World Business Chicago to find points of integration where we can double down on business and sport, whether that could be creating more business relationships, potential relocations, etc. So.
One of the things that people don't know about Cara, which is important to know, is that she was a true hockey star at one point, and it really describes how she goes about recruiting for Chicago. She's always hits the ice hard and is willing to go against the wall, so we appreciate that about you.
I just had somebody ask me already, am I skating right now? Am I still skating? So thanks, Greg.
Awesome. Stephanie.
Yes.
Why don't you give us a little on your role and what your company's doing? And I'm going to come back, by the way, and ask you, all three of you, one of your greatest hits, so to speak, from a project perspective in sustainability. But first, who you are and your organization.
Sure. My name is Stephanie Katsaros. I'm the founder and president of Brightbeat, and we're an environmental and social sustainability consultancy in Chicago. Founded in 2009, and I had worked in media and marketing and special events for kind of part one of my career, traveled around the world, came back, started this business working on large-scale events and facilities, sustainability strategies, really sort of beginning at the base level, working with the village of Rosemont back in the day, and really understanding what the issues and needs were at one venue and how do you scale solutions for a community, for community impact, for reducing waste, looking at energy efficiency opportunities, water reuse, catchment, and so much has changed since 2009. We worked on the Democratic National Convention. I co-led sustainability for that, working closely with the city, and also through work where you need to come up with systems level solutions. Brightbeat has worked with the city and the county and the state of Illinois on kind of how policy and sustainability bridge the gap between operations that exist now and kind of where we need to be to hit climate goals, to fulfill commitments, and not only sort of working with those entities themselves, but really recognizing who are the system stakeholders, where can we leverage opportunities to make positive impact. So I'm really happy to be here, and thanks for having me.
No, it's great to have you here. And yesterday, I have to apologize for the plenary. There was a huge mistake made in the content that was presented. I'm not sure if you guys all heard that there was only one answer to the question, White Sox or Cubs? And we all know that it's appropriate in Chicago to say there are two answers. There may be just one answer for some. And I would have answered the question completely differently. That's why I wore my American flag Cubs lapel pin today. But our next guest is from the Chicago Cubs. And could you tell us a little bit about you and your work at your organization?
Yeah, so I work on our operations team, and I'm kind of in a unique position where I don't handle so much of the day-to-day, but I get to think, long-term, rolling out strategic initiatives, and a lot of project management of bringing kind of people together to do some of the more long-term thinking while we manage, 81 games, however many concerts, special events, et cetera. So one of the things that we've been working on the past few years is our sustainability strategy, defining, what our goals are, who we want to be in this space. So I've helped lead that across all of our different teams for the Cubs.
Fantastic. And something you may not know is that you have a 6-week-old.
Yeah, I'm so sorry if my brain freezes. Please give me a little bit of grace. 6-week-old at home. She is sleeping, but the fog is real for all you moms out there. My first day back at work. But this isn't work.
This is fun. It's a little bit of work. We got it. So great. Well, what I thought I would do is, because you all have such esteemed backgrounds and you've done some amazing work, if you could just pick one, and you could do it as a mini case study, kind of what was the situation, what were the actions, what was the reaction of one of your favorite sustainability projects. I'll start here again.
Yeah, I was describing before, obviously, as I said at the onset, I'm sport day in, day out. And, we have this opportunity as being stewards for our city to bring people to our city and fall in love with our city. Other opportunities that come with hosting major sporting events. Often they come with, leagues that have their own initiatives and resources and commitments to sustainability, and certain programming that's important for them to bring along with them, so they're not just in and out of the city just for the event. And we respect that, and we definitely try to tap into that when the opportunity presents. And one that I had mentioned to Phil, well, I'll say that we were talking about a couple, and Stephanie and I have just met first time today, but we realized we had actually worked on a same project related to the NFL draft, which is very cool to just see how, my smaller scope of this sustainability world is like that. It really does reach people who know what they're doing. So I'm thankful for that. But one that was more recent that I really enjoyed, and I think that it hit on a lot of different levels, was an event we hosted. It's called Sail GP, which is a competitive match racing sailing race on huge catamaran boats, dual hull, they foil. It's an international competition, so of course from the objectives of my role, we are bringing in international competitors, international athletes and their fans to Chicago to compete, or as fans, but also there's a live broadcast so people can see these incredible boats with the backdrop of our city. So I'm like, check, my goals are being met here. But then on top of it, what are all these additional marginal benefits? Well, Sail GP, they compete in the water. We were the first and only freshwater event for America's Cup, which was Sail GP. It was kind of an offshoot of America's Cup. But Sail GP really notched it up, and I think, with their different programs and initiatives. And I do encourage everyone to just Google Sail GP and their initiatives, because there are many, because they race all over the world. Their athletes are super conscious about the water is where they live, work, play, feed their families, everything. So they take it very seriously. It's really impressive, to the point where, one, they have created a part of the competition relevant to the scoring and how they compete, not just their skill on the water, but for each team, they have an impact score gradient, essentially, that actually plays into their overall scoring in this competition, which I think is very unique. Remarkable. I don't know many others where, hey, I can do better in this league if I do better in the way that I'm impacting. And each year there's also an award for the team who does the best, but then also it does impact their competition score. Wow. But particularly when they came to Chicago, they had approached us. I wouldn't necessarily know, hey, you could do this and this would be really great and match with what we need and what you do, but they're very good at figuring that out. And so we facilitated introductions to people in the city, and in this project worked with Friends of the Chicago River. And Sail GP and the athletes, which I think is important because they're here, of course, to compete, but they take this seriously, take the time out and participate in the actual program. And it was an in-stream habitat kind of recreation or enhancement along the Chicago River, I think near the Lathrop Homes site. And they did about 2 miles and planted over 5,000 plants. Wow. And funded it. And, of course,
it's remarkable.
I talk about, the skyline that you see with the boats and that photo op and people seeing that, but then also seeing those same athletes operating those amazing boats, getting, their hands and feet and, in the water and doing a project in a place that they don't even live. They're just here for a week. And again, that also impacting their score in competition. Yeah. So I thought that was amazing because of how it kind of pulls it all together. It wasn't just a side project, we're here for the photo op and do good little item, but it's part of their overall sustainability initiatives throughout their season, I should say, of competing.
Deeply in their DNA, right?
Yeah, it's incredibly impressive. I'm like, are you a scientist or are you an athlete? You're both, a lot of things here.
And the fans of sailing, of course, are going to have an unusual relationship with water and with bodies of water, and so it's a way into the heartstrings, right?
Yeah,
and
definitely.
a place that people are deeply concerned about. Okay, that's a great one. And then Stephanie, I think you're going to give us some on the DNC because you hit that ball out of the park. Good one.
Got that.
Yeah, yes. Okay. But
Yeah. And I'm so impressed with what you just said about the score being related,
Right.
because I think that gets to, how you plan to do what you're doing, sort of what comes first. And it's interesting, the DNC, I had nothing to do with getting it to the state of Illinois. I know that Illinois and Chicago and, other stakeholders in the state put sustainability in as one of the 4 pillars to get, sort of to attract the Democratic National Convention Committee to host it here. But so it's good that it's in the design phase. But then, we were sort of brought in after some things were started. And it's interesting to look at when we put it in the choice selection of the host city for events like the Olympics, like the DNC, and make that not a requirement, but an attractive element, it really makes a difference. So that we did that in Chicago. So our sustainability leadership is part of what drew the Democratic National Convention Committee to host it here. So we had a big responsibility to really draft the scope for sustainability for the city. And then, I'm glad. It feels that we hit it out of the park. There was a lot, right? The convention was held at United Center. There was a big expo at McCormick Place. There was a volunteer appreciation party at Wrigley, all these media events that took place at Navy Pier. We wanted to have an operational impact in as many of those spaces as possible, but then you had 1,000 or hundreds of other events in the city, and how do you manage sustainability for a city? What we were fortunate to be able to do with my co-lead on this was Marley Finnegan with Purpose is her company, was build guidelines and playbooks really for the city of Chicago to host events as sustainably as possible. And then we executed that at the venues I mentioned. But what makes me excited most is the food rescue initiative that we did.
Yeah.
As a stakeholder, I'm on the Illinois Food Scrap and Composting Coalition. I co-lead the Wasted Food Action Alliance. I lead the Chicago Sustainability Task Force. Anyone who hears me on Zooms gets to hear my long intro. But I'm part of all these collaborative coalitions where we're just trying to do better together. And what's been very clear is that we don't have a food recovery, food rescue infrastructure in the city of Chicago. The Greater Chicago Food Depository does an amazing job, but their job is to support food insecure individuals, and figuring out how to rescue food at the end of a Cubs game is not their purpose. And so where do we find the solution here? Our organization and the city of Chicago hosted a sustainability committee, a group of departments across the city. Angela and I worked so closely on this, and we really built a program whereby 26, I believe, different community-based organizations received surplus food from the events that I mentioned, specifically from United Center, McCormick Place, and Navy Pier. And so to facilitate such an operation and identifying, what are the best tools to do such work. The hatchery and other really great organizations that have, if it's storage space that was needed, figuring out transportation in the highest level security event in the country. We had, I think, 4 living presidents in there. Like we couldn't leave the building till President Biden left.
Right.
We were sitting there with our food ready to donate. We had to wait for the president to leave. It was like, this is funny. But basically 27,000 pounds of food was rescued. It was redistributed to 26 organizations across the city. The playbook exists, and the opportunity to continue that work, the Cubs are leaders in the city of Chicago in terms of what large-scale facilities, sports stadiums are doing, and McCormick Place has been doing some great things for years. So be able to really lean into that and develop standards to hopefully make Chicago food recovery something amazing is possible, and so that's why I'm excited.
That DNC effort has to have been unusual in its magnitude, though. Did it set any records, or?
There's never been a tracked food rescue of this size and scale. You know, I don't want to say we broke the Guinness Book of World Records, though I know somebody wanted to submit it.
Okay. Yeah.
It
Why not? Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
You got a marketing guy here.
I think what's most important is that, you know, it does look good on paper. I mean, we did some great work, and we really transformed the way the United Center managed its material for those 5 days. Like, there's opportunity to really continue the excellence. But what's really cool is that we proved it can be done.
Yep.
I mean, we may have made history, but we proved that it was possible. And I think that sometimes the fear of failing, you know, at scale
right.
is scary enough to prevent people from giving it a shot.
Yeah, so I just started at World Business Chicago about 5 months before the DNC. And it is fair to say that I saw the same cycle with the DNC that you see with all major events, like the Olympics in particular, where there's an elation at the moment you win. And then up until about a week before the event, everyone goes into deep despair. They start planning how they're going to be out of town. They complain about traffic. And then somewhere around 12 hours before, they start scrambling for tickets. And then by the end of it, they're like, that was the greatest thing ever. Why didn't I think about it ahead of time? And then, you know, within 2 months, you're starting to talk about legacy. And legacy is, what did we do at the stadiums? What did we do with sustainability? And it becomes such an important tale, you know, to the end. And legacy is an important part. And you guys did a great job. And I cannot tell you how palpable the fear was in advance, and how happy everyone was when it went off without a hitch. And it just reminds you, Chicago does big events well. But speaking of big events, I think the number one largest aggregation of humans was in Grant Park, for a non-religious event, was in Grant Park the day the Cubs won the World Series, or for the parade. Yeah, somewhat religious. So it's the 5th of all time. So you have to like go back to the Peloponnesian War to find things that rival this event and people. But so you walk into the Cubs with this responsibility. What kind of things do you focus on there? I'm assuming your greatest hit is at the Cubs. You know, that might.
Yeah, sure is. Yeah. But it's funny, you talk about legacy and what Wrigley Field and the Cubs lead. So it's big shoes to fill. And think about, like you said, the fear of failing, you know, at a large scale with such a large brand. Like, that's scary. You don't want to, you know, do something and it not be big enough. And people say, well, why didn't you do that before? So sustainability was really a journey for us. And you two hit on it incredibly well with the collaboration, root it in the core of your business, and then how do you make sustainability sustainable? So I think the best thing we've done that I can share that's very concrete brings that all together, because you can't just do this alone. I work on our operations team, but without our marketing team, our community affairs team, our facilities team, none of this would have happened. So I'll kind of talk about that and then go back to why it's so important to have manuals, make sure things are repeatable. How do you tell your story? That's another big piece of it, is we're doing good work and you have to share it. You can't just keep it to yourself and say, oh, we're doing good work, pat ourselves on the back, because people are looking to you. So you have to kind of get over the oh, we don't want to be egotistical about sharing. You have to share it,
yeah.
Which has been a learning process for us too. So one of the really, really cool things we've done and will continue to do, it's not finished yet, is we just replaced a year and a half ago. We had, believe it or not, the original wood roof over Wrigley Field. So it was in a state of repair where it was, hey, we could keep making these patch replacements, or we could replace the whole roof. So we ended up replacing the whole entire roof. So we had all of these, historic, original, beautiful, wood beams that we had. And, usually, what we had done in the past is, we work at a very fast paced in sports. We have a full season of games, but then we do all of this other stuff. We have a lot of construction going on in the off season. So a lot of times, things would just go to waste in construction projects. So it was hey, let's start thinking and planning in advance about what we're going to do with some of the waste that comes from these, giant construction projects. So with the wood roof, we started thinking really early about what we could do with all of this wood. So, it started off as, hey, we could make picture frames and bats and, a bunch of little stuff for, season ticket holders and corporate partners. And the minute we got a bunch of people in the room, we started to think bigger about, what this could be. So we started to engage our community affairs department saying, hey, what is the community, what could they benefit from our waste? What could we do in the community that really aligns with their goals, their priorities? On the facility side, what could we do with this wood? How could we mill it? Is it safe? Going through that process. On the communication side, how do we tell this story? On the marketing side, how do we go about marketing this correctly? So we were able to salvage tons, literally, of wood. And there's plans about how we can now redistribute that in the community all around the Chicago area. So we want to be in all neighborhoods of Chicago. We want to benefit the community. So being able to salvage construction materials, get it into the right people's hands that could use it, tell the story correctly so other people can start thinking big about projects. And then to Steph's point, making sure now with every construction project, this is in checklists, this is at checkpoints of what can we do with the waste? How can we not waste as much? What other projects can we do around Wrigley Field that are going to save energy, save money, get the community involved, tell that story. So it's really, not just the, tons of material we've saved and given to the community and be integrated in the community, but laying the footprint for, how do we do this moving forward? How do we root it in the core of our operations? So this can happen every time without Maria knocking on your door being like, hey, what are you doing with all that stuff? It's getting everyone involved and having the collaboration across the whole organization. So now people are thinking about this. People are now coming to us with ideas of, hey, someone came to me and wanting to put beehives on the roof. Can we do it? Yes, we can do it. So that's the exciting thing is, that's kind of a small case study of what we're doing with tons of waste. But the thing that excites me the most and the most success we've had is now getting people coming to us and saying, hey, I have this idea, how do we do it? And really rooting repetitive practices in key operations.
I have to compliment you on just how open the Cubs are to be helpful across the entire city on this topic. So I'll give you, there's an organization, Midwest Sustainability Network. We asked the Cubs to host an event, and they were the first. Now you're on the board, and it was great because I think collaboration is unique and different in this space, and different parties have to come together that don't ordinarily come together. You don't normally have folks that are working on energy policy, road policy, working on the water system overall, and a marketing executive for a team that sponsors the Cubs, right? So out of that collaboration, I remember us talking about recycling and you saying that there are certain facilities that we don't have in Chicago, and then the restaurant vendor mentioned that they know that there's one in San Diego, but we need one in Chicago. And then we got the Staines family involved, and now we might be able to build this and create jobs in Chicago in a way that's completely different. But those parties that got involved were remarkable. And one of them was the Staines family and the laundry that they built on the west. I think you had some involvement in that as well? Not
involvement, but lots of visibility. Because the North Lawndale Employment Network, I mean, just as an aside, I'm on the local advisory board of iHeartMedia, and Brenda has been a part of it forever, together 15 or so years. And in North Lawndale, there are so many community assets. It's such a powerful community. Yeah. And when Fillmore Linens was built, it's a wash hub for linens embedded in community, with the initiatives being the money is reinvested. That community reinvestment piece is what's key and core, and attracted me to the discussions that are underway, basically looking at where, an infrastructure assessment of Chicago, where are there opportunities for reuse. Those of us, Levy restaurants and the Cubs, many others are considering how we can adopt reuse in the city. The Chicago Bears have in their United club, a small pilot. It's maybe 3,000, but they have a cup reuse program there now with a company called Bold Reuse. So we've got these, really strong highlights of opportunities to grow, but we need infrastructure, and where we intersected was the value of embedding it into an operation where community reinvestment can be at the ground level. And then also opportunities for workforce development. Like any idea, when we have the opportunity to begin building infrastructure that doesn't exist here now, we need to think long term and think about who benefits. And I feel like, from my perspective, there is such public interest in finding the assets and supporting them.
Yep.
And then there's private or philanthropic interests in going there too. It's a real exciting time, I think, for that holistic collaboration coming together. And so a WASH hub is real. There's also a lot of interest in food rescue hubs, which also are looking in spaces where surplus food is needed. How does it link to stadiums and other event facilities? And how do we really build an infrastructure that's going to support and be feasible for the needs of our large stadiums, but then also where it can be based geographically, and then also in terms of the outcomes and impacts will be more neighborhood level. That's what they're doing. That's what we're all kind of working on, I think, collaboratively.
This laundry in Lawndale was an incredible project, and the immediate realization was laundry in the hospitals in the Chicago area was being shipped out, driven hundreds of miles away, and the carbon footprint of that activity was tremendous. And then, in the event of an emergency, it also pointed out that those activities would probably be shut down. And so, if Chicago were to hit, these are the kinds of things you start thinking about strongly in a pandemic. If we had a real emergency, we wouldn't be able to change the bed sheets in our hospitals. So the stakeholders who came together were remarkable to make that happen. And then you get a playbook that you can apply to other people's issues if they're connected. And I think one of the biggest things that came out of that is the state of Illinois has about 440,000 roughly jobs that are currently at companies that are brown, so to speak. They're not green energy fueled or green companies. And the prediction is that they will all be eclipsed by green companies. So we have to be at the forefront of this. And then obviously sport is what Chicago's all about. I mean, we've got new stadiums coming up. We've got, I'd say almost every global sport is trying to relocate to Chicago, right? So who are some partnerships become important? Any unusual partners that you feel like you work with in this area that you wouldn't have expected? Or what kind of partnerships have you had to establish?
Well, one example I can give that hits on the collaboration and just the idea of transferring a lot of material and how the carbon footprint of that and how, the expense of that, and then the impact, the negative impact that it can have to the environment. So NASCAR, about 3 years ago, we hosted the first ever NASCAR street race here in Chicago, and just recently completed the third year of it. And there was a lot of investment and a lot of questions, rightfully so, from people at the onset. Oh, how would this, impact? Oh, there's fuel, there's this. Lots of questions. So a lot of time spent, working with community members, residents, so they had a better understanding of not just it's a sport of stock car racing, but they're very conscious about many things. They understand how their sport impacts communities in which they race. So I won't touch on everything they do, but I wouldn't be able to. But I will say, for coming to Chicago, there was a big investment that had to be made to be able to create a safe and secure race track in downtown Chicago. And that was about 2.4 miles of barriers that we needed to have, and then would need to reuse for race year after year. So that's really heavy. like concrete,
Yeah.
very heavy, a lot.
It's got to stop a car at very
yes.
high speeds.
Yes, and hard to move and not inexpensive to move. And obviously moving that distance, you can only put, I think it's like 2 barriers on one flatbed. So I forget the math at the moment, but 2.4 million or 2.4 miles, that was a lot of barriers. So we had great partners in Chicago where we, after the first year, the development group at the 78 allowed us to move the barriers from Grant Park to their site, of which was not in an active construction site, which was incredible because we were like, do we have to take these to Joliet, or do we have to take them somewhere else in the state, and to find the amount of space you need to store all of these barriers? And again, the truckloads of these. So having partners locally, being able to move them from Grant Park over to the 78 was a very short distance, an incredible and generous partnership from the group at the 78, allowing us to do that, which also then enabled, there was a construction project being handled by CDOT in that area, and the alderman in the ward, Pat Dowell, she didn't want the construction project to, it was completed early. So let's just give a clap for that. But anyway, that was completed earlier, but they didn't want, there was a trend of, people drifting, drafting, doing things with their cars you're not supposed to do, dangerous in neighborhoods. And so we said, well, you can use these barriers. We're going to store them over in this area. It was the same area where the construction project was completed, to line the corridor so that it prevents or deters people from doing this activity. So there was like a bunch of wins all in that area, all based on the fact that we were trying not to use a lot of fuel to take these barriers a far distance. So I always look at that as, it's just, I just look, I'm like, oh, there's a win, there's a win, there's a win, just because of the collaboration amongst the groups. And then after the first year, we had to find another location because the 78 was looking at hopefully being able to begin construction. Another great partner at Farpoint Development allowed us at the Michael Reese site, also a short distance from Grant Park, allowed us to store our barriers on their site as they continue to look at the developments that they're going to have at that site. So again, great partnerships in Chicago that enabled, I'd have to do the math, or somebody smarter than me could, to determine what was the true impact of being able to do that? Because again, it would have cost a lot of money and used a lot of fuel to take these barriers to a place where we could store them and then again relocate them back downtown and then remove them and put them somewhere. So that proximity, the actual geographical proximity and the great partnerships, and Farpoint again allowed us to unload our barriers at their development site post the most recent race.
And that kind of brings us back to the fact that concrete barriers is not what you first think of when you think of sport or NASCAR, right?
Yeah.
And these logistical elements of huge events do have a potential of real environmental impact, right? Both negatively and then hopefully maybe turn into something positive. I know you've passed some legislation on this topic, or worked on some legislation.
I take
incredible.
no credit for anything I talk about today. I'm a collaborator. But the Large Event Facilities Act is, LEFA for short, LEFA, is a policy that went into effect June of last year, enacted, I should say signed in June and enacted January 1st, requiring large event facilities with 35 or 100 greater capacity to recycling compost. And as an advocate, we spoke to legislators, understanding the challenges associated with it, had some real conversations. The interesting thing about state and I learned a lot about politics going through this, but just more on the policy side, the state policy was written in a way that counties across the state can enforce it as they, writing their own ordinances and creating the toolkit, creating the requirements more specifically on a localized level, so much was required after it was passed. Like, it seemed like a win. Yay, we're going to support leaders like the Cubs that are already doing this, and we're going to sort of nudge the ones that aren't. But your policy has to be written in a way that it can be implemented, and it wasn't. So stakeholders like the Chicago Sustainability Task Force and Cook County, we got together at DePaul. We had some professors in. Maria participated, and we had a workshop to help understand how are we going to implement this across all stakeholders. You know, there's those interested in reuse, those interested in composting, those concerned about contamination, the recyclers and the composting industry, just coming together to initiate conversations that are still continuing to understand we have a goal, but what's the reality here? And when you're talking about the amount of waste that's generated when we all come together to celebrate, you know, a World Series win or a NASCAR event or whatever, you know, we have to think about the fact that there needs to be infrastructure to support it. And so the, you know, the leadership that Cook County has taken has been really exciting. And the ordinance that they've written will really support how venues across the state can expect to be required. In short, back of house is where the legislation is primarily focused for the first year. Second year would move to front of house. So maybe fans won't see the work that's going on. The messaging and storytelling, you know, that's the funny part, because you tell everyone you're doing it, and then they look in your bin and they see it's contaminated, and then they put that on Instagram, and then, you know, so it's like, how do you do these things where you make sure that it can actually happen well also educating the public, because the cleaner they make the streams, the more they bring their reusable water bottles, the more they consider, you know, where they want to go as being, you know, making the decisions, just like the score for the sailing. Mm-hmm. Yep. You know, how, if they are driving, you know, if we can drive consumer behavior change, then we can really get, you know, fan behavior change, then we can really start to see success with some of these diversion initiatives. So we're actively working on this now. The Illinois EPA plans to publish a toolkit for large event facilities later this summer. And it's actually very collaborative, so anyone can go to the toolkit that's available online and submit feedback. So that would be any stakeholder, including advocates, including you know, consultants that want to be involved in this. The food recovery piece is a really big deal, though it's not legislated. The creative reuse piece is a really big opportunity, again, though not legislated. And that's the fine line that we're walking right now, because I'm not, you know, I'm not enforcement, I'm not public sector. They want to make sure you know how to follow the letter of the law, but we want them to do more. Yep. So how do we support that while also celebrating what folks are doing now? So I think, you know, recognition that comes publicly from, you know, the corporate challenges and things like that. I mean, it's competition. Yeah. So how do you sort of take the ideas and the sensibility of sport and kind of bring that into really getting Chicago teams to compete with one another in putting the environment first and the community first, in addition to the other priorities.
So I think what you're hearing is that oftentimes, when it comes to sustainability, people think sport and the relationship between sustainability and real environmentalism is pretty surface. But these are deep and meaningful collaborations that are bringing new partners to the table, moving the needle quite a bit. And we haven't really chatted at all about sponsorship and storytelling, which is kind of where this conversation usually starts, right? So what's up with the Cubs? What can we expect next, or what are the kinds of things you have cooking up? And do any of your sponsors care at all that you're doing this?
Yes, which is so great, because it helps me push not my agenda, our collective agenda forward. Because it's one thing to say compliance, it's one thing to say, hey, we need to do the right thing. But when you have, you know, corporate sponsors that are paying you dollars, you know, that talks a lot of the time. So partners are so important in pushing us further faster, I would say too, because it puts the people in the room on the corporate partnerships team wanting to get things done too. So, we'd been talking about how do we do solar, how do we do renewable energy on the Wrigley Field campus.
Wow.
People that don't know Wrigley Field very intimately, it is a very intimate facility, kind of shoved right in the middle of a neighborhood, has been there for over 100 years. So hard to really, develop or build the area around it. We knew we wanted to do some type of renewable energy. Putting it on the roof didn't really do too much. It was about 2% of our energy. So it was like, what can we do that's going to be meaningful? So we went out and tried to find a corporate partner that would help us kind of solve our problem. So we ended up partnering with Invenergy, who's another great Chicago local company. We're now an anchor tenant in a community solar project that's going to be great. On like the waste side, Levy has been a huge partner with us to not just help recycle our waste, but reduce it. They kind of introduced the idea that like premium spaces don't need to be excess, which is great. Do you need to put 3 rows of salmon out, or can you put 1 row of salmon out and it still look beautiful? And you're not wasting all of this stuff for our fans. So Levy has been really helpful too, and in our back of house composting and a lot of programs they have. Food donation has been huge. After COVID, there were all of these rules. So bringing that back, bringing more partners to the table. I think last year we donated over 20,000 items, and we're pacing well ahead of that this year to what I've seen being out. You have other waste partners like Hefty and Republic that are trying to figure out, how do we do this together? So they're asking, how do we recycle our cups? How do we do this front of house legislation and not just do letter of the law, but spirit of the law? So right now it's a lot of testing and measuring before we can like fully implement. So they've been, super helpful. And then it's the community partners too. Like it was, hey, we have all these extra seats that have been sitting around since our, 2015 restoration of Wrigley Field. Like, are there parks that can take them? So this summer we actually installed, thousands of seats in Carywood Park off of Addison Street, which is, a couple miles away from Wrigley. So instead of, concrete benches, they now have our old seats in there.
Oh, wow.
So engaging these partners, it's just, you can magnify your efforts both in the ballpark and then also in the community. So, partnerships are just key, and like having the right conversations and making sure things happen faster. Reuse is on our agenda. Like, how do we start piloting some type of reuse, and then make sure we're not just having lip service to it. Like, what is actually going to make an impact? And Steph knows all about this. I talk to her about this all the time because she's like, "Can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this?" And it's, well, how do we first test it, but then also like what's going to make the biggest impact? So partnerships are huge. The storytelling behind it is huge because, like I said, if you don't tell your story, no one's going to know, no one's going to get inspired by it. And that's what sports is. It's inspiring people. So now that we finally, have data to prove what we're doing, we're confident in being able to tell this story.
That's fantastic. Well, we've got about 10 minutes left here, so I think we can entertain questions if folks have them. Okay, good. We're going to have at least one. I'm trying to see how much wiggling and hand. Okay, great. All right, we're gonna do that. Then that's good. We'll start over here, I guess, and then we got one in the back.
Hey, good morning. In 2010, I attended I think it was 2011, I attended an NBA game in London at the O2 Center, Lakers versus Timberwolves, and I was surprised when Kobe Bryant himself came out with a microphone before the game to thank and welcome the fans. Obviously a great brand extension.
Yep.
As you all look at what's going on in the Middle Eastern countries, Saudi, UAE in particular, and you see their investments, do you think U.S. sports franchises and leagues will invest in those markets? Will they be successful, or will the obvious pitfalls prevent them from doing so?
If you want to take that, I've got strong opinions on some of that. So
I mean, I would say just from my experience, a lot of the clients that we work with, there are clients that are going into those markets because there's a lot of money right off the bat. And I think a lot of them are testing it or gonna do it for a year because it almost puts them automatically in the green for other events that they might host because of the money that they're paying there. So I'm interested to see if potentially the Laver Cup goes out there. And I mean, I know SailGP has. I mean, there's groups that are, but again, is it sustainable in the sense that they'll continue to go out there? I'm not sure about that, but I have seen leagues or new brands dabble.
Yeah. I think for sure you're going to see interaction going both ways. Sport is one of the fastest growing industries in the world. It's becoming part of our lives. It's becoming part of the way that we interact with our apps and the rest of our life. And so everybody's scrambling for market entries. Not only are you going to see us going over there, at World of Chicago, we're getting cricket and rugby and any team that's popular globally, any sport is looking to expand. It's all part of growth and ownership, right? So now I will point out one thing that is interesting. I think the U.S. has woken up to the fact that other players might try to dominate the world too, right? It's not just us exporting. We have a great product and people love it. EPL is still the most popular product in the world, the English Premier League football. But there is a problem in the area that we are talking about. When you get to the depth of the ownership's commitment to some of the things that people feel are their values, some countries have a real hard time competing there. And I'll give you an example. Would be I was part of getting a bunch of sponsors together to start the rainbow laces in the English Premier League, and the captain did a rainbow band on their arm. We've heard that kept folks that had never seen that kind of message in a formal environment in many countries, from all sorts of horrible sulfax like suicide and things of that nature, because they've just never been validated as being okay. And after that, it had to be blocked out of TV in some of those countries, but the message was out there. So it gets really tough when you start to talk about ownership and values when it comes to diversity, sustainability, and things of that nature. Could be another forcing mechanism of change as well, which gets pretty exciting. There was one back there. Does that kind of get it, what you're asking? Yeah.
Hi, I arrived late to this session, so I apologize if this question was answered
You
at
are
the
in
beginning.
so much trouble.
But I was curious, like, in terms of a stakeholder being a fan, like what you feel like fans and patrons of sports can do to contribute towards this cause, because I feel like if they would be attending the games kind of either way, what steps can they take to support their own teams becoming more climate conscious?
Thoughts?
I have
What?
a
Yeah.
great
What?
an-
Yeah.
Like, it's funny. You're very good friends with our ownership group. Our ownership group is from here. They met their wife in the bleachers. Like, great story. They care. And the emails that I get forwarded from our ownership group are incredible. So, like, it is sometimes the one email of that one situation that happened that one time gets all the way up to us to do something about. So as a fan, I think you have way more power, than you really think to write in. And the more times people see, hey, why am I throwing my plastic cup away? There's no recycling bins, If those questions keep getting asked of us, we're gonna have to respond to it. And it's like, what do you mean we don't have recycling bins? If I was the owner of a team, I would be like, what are we doing? So I think fans can push and ask on a lot of different areas. And if you have a good ownership group like we do, like, we listen and things get done about it. So I say, if you see something you don't like or it seems off or you want to push it further, write in. Get some of your friends to write in. We read it and it shows up in the data.
You have anything to add to that? I know the NFL, for example, had a lot of things that they asked you to do, which may not have been due to their deep commitment to the topic, but more to fan pressure, right?
Yeah, so when we've worked with the NFL, they had a number of initiatives, and we were able, something I mentioned early on, and Stephanie had worked with as well, and a lot of initiatives that they also were able to collaborate with CDA, Chicago Department of Aviation, who has a vast number of initiatives among both our international airports. And so they were able to use some best practices that had already been established and almost showcase them in a way at the NFL draft, which again just gave more exposure to, honestly, like the hundreds and thousands of people who were working to operate the draft, from the fan zones to the food and beverage areas to that just overall all operational components. But I have to say one thing about the cup recycling, because I saw something in Japan that I thought was amazing when we were there recently, with how they take the cups back, and like it's like a sleeve or something. So also I think the garbage bags are smaller and whatnot. Well, they just don't have a lot of garbage, period, but it's like you put the cup in and it all slots back in, so all of the cups are recycled into a stack, and everyone's just like, I was like, this is so genius. How come we all throw a cup like this and that, and then they're just piled on top of each other and create this huge bag but when you get the cups, they all come in a sleeve, and that's how they take them back in recycling. I just like, wow, that's just genius.
You could go back to organizing the beer snake in the fields.
It is
right?
that. It's
Yeah,
the
with
beer
all the
snake
cups.
in a responsible,
way.
way.
I'll just add a color. I think that the teams generally are appreciative of fan feedback that creates action. These things, it's hard to organize and prioritize your day for anyone. And if you know that your customer is asking you to do it, they usually say thank you for, I kind of would like to do it, but unless the fans ask, I won't be able to add it to my agenda. So it's great to have fan activism for most folks. This gentleman here in the beard.
Hi, thank you guys. Yeah, this is on. So recycling cups, offsetting your electricity with solar, that feels like almost the baseline. It feels like what you guys have been talking about is like the power of messaging that sports has to like, how do you use the power of messaging to get people to do other climate actions that maybe aren't related to sports, like installing heat pumps or buying an EV? And related, I've only seen one team, a Vermont soccer team, really embrace that. So I'm just wondering how you think about that, and relatedly, how you think about that messaging in a way that, like, when you do that, does it become politicized at all in your fan base? And how, like, sports, I think, is one of the most politically diverse spaces in the country. And so how do you approach that messaging from that angle?
I'll throw one quick response on that, and then get the team's perspective. But there's kind of two worlds in storytelling when it comes to sports sponsorship. So you may be a general NASCAR fan, but you're never going to hear the concrete barrier story and the fuel served, as a general fan. If you're in the industry, you know the story, and it motivates you and it changes your behavior. I was at Johnson Controls, which makes heat pumps specifically, and HVAC systems, et cetera, and smart stadiums. And what the Bucks did up in Milwaukee in creating one of the platinum LEED standard stadiums is now, through their innovation, is common practice as people are doing and building other stadiums. So there's kind of a B2B conversation, a business-to-business conversation that the fans don't always know, but it gets translated in the fact of, is that stadium got a LEED standard to it or not? Is it a platinum LEED? Because fans love that. They do love that. But they may not know the issue of heat pumps or HVAC, which I have been waiting since I started at Johnson Controls like 8 years ago for an HVAC question, so I had to jump in on that. But
I have a quick story if it's useful. When working on the DNC, we were looking at all the impacts, energy, travel, food, water, and waste. And we created an initiative called the Travel Carbon Inset Initiative. And this was apolitical, because we weren't trying to be political, although it was the DNC, but to allow all those who were participating to offset their own travel using basically a very simple web page that the money that they put towards would go to a local organization. We selected, or I should say Growing Home was selected as the local organization doing amazing work and providing organic food to local community members, as well as job training and other great things, we were able to say, hey, not only if you're flying in offset, but if you're coming from these cities, these are the ways to get here more responsibly. So we kind of created a multi-level travel recommendations for the participants from around the country, as well as kind of regional, and then even a micro mobility messaging. The whole city had, it might have been like hashtag DNC 2024. If you used that, you got a discount on bikes and e-bikes and things. So really just trying to talk to an attendee, granted this isn't sports, but from the same perspective, giving them an opportunity to do something was an idea that worked.
Yeah, great, thank you. I think we heard, some, again, I can't move from the words material and meaningful as far as the level of effort that's going on. But any effort from fans, from companies to embrace the storytelling that's happening in sport can only help amplify and get the word out there. It's good for all activists to be doing that. And then otherwise, there's a whole industry out there that is helping sport do this. And I suspect it's going to be something that a lot of folks follow. I want to say thank you to these incredible panelists, 3 incredible women who are leading the way. Let's give them a big round of applause. And thank you very much. Thank you.